Lyria stood in the wide, shining hall of the Orion research station, her silver eyes fixed on the rows of glowing tanks. Inside each one floated strands of living genetic material, fragments of life she had been engineering for years. She was not just a scientist. She was the leading genetic engineer of her people, the Illyrians. Her race valued perfection above all else. Every trait, every skill, every ability was tested, measured, and improved through careful design. Yet despite her brilliance, a shadow of frustration lingered in her mind. She had been ordered to work with an alien species. Humans. Humans were strange, too fragile, too emotional, too unpredictable. To her, they were a species that stumbled forward by accident rather than design. They survived not because of strength, but because of luck and chaos. The Illyrians called them the reckless children of the stars. When she received news that one of them had been assigned to assist her, she laughed. "A human cannot satisfy the demands of my research," she told her colleagues. "They lack discipline, they lack refinement, their minds are simple." Still, orders were orders. The station council wanted to test interspecies cooperation, and she, as one of their most respected engineers, had no choice but to accept the partnership. That morning, the human arrived. His name was Daniel. He stepped into her lab wearing a dark blue uniform, carrying a small pack of tools at his side. His hair was short, his skin pale, his eyes a steady brown that did not shift away even when she studied him coldly. Unlike many who feared Illyrians, Daniel did not bow or tremble. He simply extended his hand. "Dr. Lyria," he said, his voice calm. "I look forward to working with you." Lyria glanced at his hand and ignored it. "You will not call me doctor. You will call me chief engineer. Your role is to observe and follow my instructions. Nothing more." Daniel lowered, his hand without complaint. "As you wish, chief engineer." His tone was respectful but not weak. She disliked that. Humans were supposed to show hesitation, yet he spoke as if he was her equal. Already she felt irritation. The first hours passed in silence as she guided him through the protocols. She explained the delicate balance of Illyrian genetic code, the fragile bonds between proteins, and the centuries of work that had led to their advanced biotechnologies. Daniel listened carefully, his eyes never wandering, his mind always sharp. Still, Lyria was unimpressed. Listening is simple, she thought. Let us see how long his patience lasts. She handed him a sequence file and instructed him to align the fragments. It was not a difficult task, but it required precision. One error, and the chain would collapse. She expected him to fail within minutes. But Daniel did not fail. His fingers moved quickly over the console, his eyes scanning the patterns. When he finally looked up, he said, "It's complete, but I noticed something unusual in your code. Would you like me to show you?" Lyria raised her brow. "Unusual? Impossible. My code is flawless." He turned the screen toward her. "Here. This segment repeats twice in the chain. It doesn't break the sequence, but it slows down replication. If you adjust it like this." He tapped a key, and the display shifted. The chain becomes cleaner. For a moment, Lyria said nothing. She leaned closer, studying the result. He was correct. A tiny inefficiency she had overlooked for months was suddenly clear. Her pride bristled. She crossed her arms. "Even if you are correct, human, it is a minor detail. It does not matter." Daniel gave a small smile. "Maybe not. But small details build into bigger ones. Don't they?" Lyria turned away, her silver hair swaying behind her. "Do not assume that one accident of observation makes you skilled. You are still untested." Yet in her heart, she felt a flicker of annoyance mixed with something she could not name. How had this human seen what she had missed? Later that day, they worked on the hybrid test cells. The samples were unstable, prone to collapse under heat. Lyria had tried dozens of solutions without success. Daniel watched silently for some time, then asked, "Why not try slowing the energy feed instead of increasing it?" Lyria almost laughed. "Because that is not how Illyrian cells behave. They require acceleration. Human cells don't," Daniel replied. "Sometimes, slowing the process lets them adapt better. Maybe this hybrid has a little of both." His words sounded naive. Still, something about his confidence unsettled her. Against her judgment, she allowed him to try. Together, they adjusted the settings. The cell trembled, wavered, and then stabilized. Lyria stared at the screen in disbelief. The cell was holding. Daniel leaned back, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "Not bad for a fragile human, right?" Her lips tightened. She wanted to scold him, but the words caught in her throat. He was right. Again. That evening, as the lights of the station dimmed into night cycle, Lyria sat alone in her private chamber, staring at the stars through the viewport. She replayed the day's events in her mind. Every time she told herself humans could not satisfy the demands of science, Daniel had pushed back with proof. Every time she expected him to fail, he had surprised her. Her fingers brushed over the glowing console where her personal log waited. She hesitated, then whispered aloud as she typed, "Confession. The human was not as weak as I thought. His mind is sharp. His patience is long. Still, I refuse to believe he can truly satisfy the higher standards of Illyrian science. Tomorrow will prove it." She paused, staring at the words. A shadow of doubt pressed at her, but she deleted the last line and replaced it with certainty. Tomorrow will remind him of his limits. But deep inside, a voice she tried to silence whispered otherwise. The next morning, the Orion research station hummed with quiet life. Long corridors glowed with soft blue lights, and the low vibration of engines echoed like a heartbeat. Lyria walked into the genetics lab with her usual pride, her long white coat flowing behind her. She expected Daniel to be late. Humans, she believed, were always careless with time. Instead, he was already there. Daniel stood by the main console, reading through lines of genetic data. His brow was furrowed, his hands steady as he adjusted the parameters of the system. He looked so focused that he did not notice her at first. "You are early," Lyria said sharply, stepping inside. Daniel turned and gave her a small smile. "Good morning, Chief Engineer. I thought I should review yesterday's results before you arrived." Lyria tilted her head, suspicious. "And what have you found?" "That your corrections worked," Daniel said. "But I think we can improve them further. I ran a small simulation, just a theory, but I'd like to test it with your permission." Her silver eyes narrowed. "Permission?" He spoke as if he belonged here. Still, she could not deny his results yesterday had been useful. With a wave of her hand, she granted him access. "Do not waste my time, human. Show me." Daniel began to work. He spoke as he typed, explaining his reasoning in simple words, as though he wanted her to follow his every step. He proposed slowing certain processes, then balancing them with Illyrian acceleration methods. It was an unusual mix, two very different philosophies of science. When the simulation finished, the display showed a steady, stable cell. Lyria leaned forward. Her heart gave a small jolt. "Impossible," she whispered. Daniel only shrugged. "Not impossible, just different." She straightened, folding her arms. "You copy our methods, but you do not understand them." Daniel shook his head. "No, I respect your methods. But sometimes new answers come when you mix two ways of thinking instead of forcing one." His calm words struck her more deeply than she expected. Illyrians rarely admitted weakness. They never accepted that another race could add value, yet here was a human, showing her results she could not deny. Over the next hours, they worked side by side. At first, Lyria gave Daniel only small tasks, aligning strands, cleaning code, monitoring energy feeds. Yet he completed each one quickly, and with care. Whenever he faced a problem, he did not panic. He asked questions. He tested. He tried again. By midday, Lyria began to notice something she had never seen before. Humans had patience. Not passive patience, but active patience. Daniel did not simply wait for results. He adjusted, corrected, and adapted with each failure. Most Illyrians hated failure. To them, every mistake was shameful. But Daniel treated mistakes as if they were stepping stones. Each one carried him closer to the answer. At one point, when a chain collapsed in front of them, Lariah frowned. "The experiment is ruined. We will need hours to rebuild." Daniel smiled gently. "Not ruined. We learned something. Next time we'll know where not to step." His words were simple, yet they burned inside her. She realized her people had forgotten this stubborn will to keep walking no matter how many times the ground gave way. Later, when the station's lights dimmed to signal rest cycle, Lariah noticed Daniel still at the console, his eyes tired but determined. "You should leave," she told him. "Humans require more rest than Illyrians. Do not overextend yourself." Daniel chuckled softly. "I'll rest soon. I just want to finish this sequence first." Lariah frowned. "Why? The council does not demand so much from you. You could leave the heavy work to me." He looked at her then, his brown eyes steady. "Because I don't want to let you down." The words caught her off guard. For a moment, she did not know how to respond. No Illyrian had ever said such a thing to her. They respected her work, yes, but none of them had spoken with such sincerity. The next day, the tension between them shifted. Lariah began to ask him for his thoughts before starting new simulations. Sometimes she dismissed his ideas, but other times she found herself curious to test them. More often than not, they worked. One evening, as they studied hybrid DNA, Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "You know," he said, "humans aren't very impressive on the outside. We're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the fastest." Lariah arched a brow. "You admit this?" He smiled. "Of course, but we make up for it in other ways. We learn, we adapt, and we keep going, no matter how many times we fall." His words reminded her of what she had seen all week. His persistence, his quiet determination, his refusal to quit. For the first time, she whispered under her breath, "Perhaps there is strength in persistence." Daniel glanced at her, but she quickly turned away, pretending she had said nothing. That night, alone in her chamber, Lariah recorded another log. "Confession," she said softly. "The human continues to surprise me. His persistence is unnatural, no, extraordinary. Where Illyrians fear failure, he embraces it. Where Illyrians would have stopped, he continues. I still cannot believe such a fragile species carries such hidden fire. Yet, I cannot deny it anymore." She hesitated, staring at the stars outside her window. "There is something within him that satisfies an emptiness I never noticed before, not with strength, not with power, but with will." Her hands trembled slightly as she ended the log. She refused to call it admiration, not yet. She refused to believe that her heart had begun to notice the human. But her own words betrayed her. The following morning, disaster struck. A containment alarm blared, red lights flashing across the lab. One of the hybrid cells had destabilized, threatening to spread across the system. Lariah rushed to the console, typing commands at lightning speed. "It's collapsing," she shouted. "If it spreads, it will destroy weeks of work." Daniel grabbed a stabilizer tool from the wall. "Then let's stop it before it spreads." She turned, shocked. "You cannot. The radiation—" But he was already moving. Without hesitation, Daniel stepped into the hazard zone, his suit shielding him only partially. He placed the stabilizer against the container, forcing the reaction back into control. Sparks flew across his visor, heat searing the air. Lariah's heart pounded. "You fool, you will be burned alive." But Daniel did not falter. With one final press, the system calmed. The alarm stopped. The cell stabilized. Breathing hard, Daniel staggered out of the hazard zone, his suit scorched. He pulled off his helmet, sweat dripping down his face. That was close. he said with a tired grin. Lyria stared at him, speechless. Why? She demanded at last. Why risk yourself for this experiment? For me? Daniel wiped his brow. Because it mattered. To you. That was enough. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in her life, the great chief engineer of the Illyrians was left in silence. That evening, in the privacy of her chamber, Lyria recorded her log with trembling fingers. Confession. Today, the human risked his life for my work. For me. I do not understand why. No Illyrian would have done such a thing without reward, without command. He acted only from choice, from heart. Perhaps I have judged too quickly. Perhaps I was wrong. Her voice grew softer, almost a whisper. For the first time, I feel something beyond science, and it terrifies me. The Orion research station had known silence before. Long nights stretched across the stars, filled only with the low hum of reactors and the endless whisper of machines. But after the containment breach, silence took on a different weight. Lyria sat at her console, the silver glow of her eyes reflecting the data screens. Yet her thoughts were not on the numbers. They were on Daniel. She replayed the scene again, and again. His bold step into the hazard zone, his hands steady as sparks rained around him. His calm words after saving her work, and her. She wanted to dismiss it as recklessness. She wanted to say humans acted without thought. But the truth would not leave her. He had chosen to risk himself, not out of duty, but out of care. For the first time, she felt uncertain about her judgment. The next morning, she found Daniel already in the lab again. His suit was patched from the previous day, and there were faint burns on his gloves. Yet his smile was the same. "Good morning, Chief Engineer," he said cheerfully, as though nothing had happened. Lyria studied him, her voice sharper than she intended. "You could have died yesterday." Daniel shrugged lightly. "But I didn't." Her jaw tightened. "You speak as if your life has no value." His expression softened. "On the contrary, I value it. That's why I chose how to use it." The word struck her again, deep and strange. Illyrians lived by order and command. Choices were guided by duty, not heart. But this human, he lived by something else entirely. They returned to work. Together they analyzed the stabilized cell Daniel had saved. It showed remarkable resilience, stronger than any previous hybrid. As they examined it, Daniel leaned forward with excitement. "Do you see this?" he asked. The human sequence fused with the Illyrian structure. It's stronger because it balanced both instead of fighting. Lyria studied the pattern carefully. It was undeniable. His reckless courage had preserved something extraordinary. "This changes everything," she murmured. Daniel nodded. "It proves humans and Illyrians might not be as incompatible as you thought." Her silver eyes flicked toward him. "Do not twist this result into something personal, human." He chuckled softly. "I'm only pointing out the evidence. Isn't that what scientists do?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. Yet she could not deny it. His words carried truth. Over the next days, their partnership deepened. Daniel continued to show persistence. He stayed late, ran simulations, adjusted codes. His body grew tired, but his determination never wavered. Each time a sequence failed, he calmly tested again. Each time Lyria predicted collapse, he found a way to stabilize. And slowly, she began to trust him. One evening, while reviewing data, Daniel leaned back in his chair. His eyes were shadowed with fatigue, but his voice was gentle. "Why did you choose genetics?" he asked her. The question surprised her. Illyrians rarely asked about personal choices. "Still," she answered, "because life can be shaped," she said softly. "Because perfection can be built. My people believe in improvement. Above all else, it is our way." Daniel thought for a moment, then asked, "And has it made you happy?" Her breath caught. "Happy? It was not a word Illyrians used often. They spoke of progress, achievement, efficiency, but not happiness. She did not answer. Instead, she turned the question back. "And you, human? Why do you risk yourself for a field not your own?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because sometimes it's not about perfection, it's about meaning. If I can help create something that matters, even if it's small, that's enough for me." His words lingered in her chest long after he fell silent. One night, disaster struck again. But this time it was not the lab. The station's outer hull shuddered as a meteor shower passed nearby. Alarms rang across the corridors. Lariah rushed to the viewport, her heart racing. A fragment had struck near their sector, cutting power to part of the lab. Emergency lights flickered. The hybrid cells wavered, their containment units struggling. Daniel was already moving. "I'll stabilize the generators," he called out. Lariah grabbed his arm. "It's too dangerous. The sector could vent." He looked at her firmly. "If we lose power, all our work, vanishes. Do you want that?" Her grip trembled. She wanted to say yes, let it go. His life mattered more. But the fire in his eyes left her, silent. She released him, and he ran into the damaged sector. Sparks lit the air, the hum of failing machines echoing through the corridors. Through the glass, she saw him fighting against failing circuits, his hands steady, his jaw clenched. At last the light steadied, the cells stabilized. The danger passed. Daniel emerged, his uniform singed, his hair damp with sweat. But he smiled. "Told you we could save it." Lariah's heart pounded. She rushed toward him, stopping only inches away. Her voice was unsteady. Why do you always risk yourself? Do you not fear death?" Daniel wiped his brow. "Of course I fear it, but I fear regret more." Her eyes widened. "Regret?" He nodded. "If I had a chance to help and didn't take it, that would haunt me more than danger ever could." For the first time in her life, Lariah felt something break inside her certainty. She had always believed Illyrians superior, humans incapable of true strength. Yet standing before her was proof that strength was not only measured in perfection, it was measured in courage. That night, Lariah could not sleep. She sat before her private log, staring at the blinking cursor. At last, she whispered her confession. Today, the human saved more than data. He saved hope. He risks himself not from command, not from obligation, but from something deeper, something I cannot measure. Perhaps it is called heart. She hesitated, her hands trembling. I once believed no human could satisfy the demands of my work, my world, my spirit. Yet this one, Daniel, proves me wrong at every turn. He satisfies something I cannot name. She stopped, breathing unevenly. Perhaps it is not weakness that defines humans. Perhaps it is this refusal to give up, and perhaps I envy it. Her voice fell into silence, but her heart beat louder than ever. The next day, she entered the lab with new eyes. She no longer looked at Daniel as a fragile assistant. She looked at him as something else, an equal, maybe even more. He glanced up from the console, smiling warmly. Ready for another day, Chief Engineer? For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile in return. Yes, Daniel. Let us continue. And in that quiet exchange, something shifted forever. The days passed, yet for Lariah, time felt different now. Each hour in the lab was no longer just filled with calculations and experiments, it was filled with a new awareness. She found herself watching Daniel when he worked, noticing the way his brow furrowed when he thought or how his hands moved carefully, as though each sequence mattered more than the last. This human, fragile, ordinary in appearance, had unsettled everything she believed. One morning, as the lab lights brightened to signal work cycle, Lariah entered to find Daniel bent over a console, humming quietly to himself. It was not a song she recognized, but the sound was warm, steady, alive. "What is that noise?" she asked, curious despite herself. Daniel looked up with a grin. "A song. Humans sing sometimes while they work. It helps us focus." Lyraya tilted her head. "Primitive." He chuckled. "Maybe. But it makes the hours easier." Something stirred inside her, something she had never felt before. The sound of his voice had made the sterile lab feel less cold. Their latest project was the most important yet, testing the stability of a fully integrated hybrid strand. If successful, it would prove that humans and Illyrians could create a genetic bond that neither species had achieved alone. Lyraya guided the sequence with practiced precision. Daniel assisted, his steady patience balancing her sharp focus. Together, they aligned the final strands. The chamber glowed softly as the new hybrid cell formed. For long minutes they watched, waiting for collapse. But it did not collapse. The sequence held. Stronger, steadier, more resilient than anything before. Daniel exhaled, breaking into a wide smile. It worked. For once, Lyraya did not hide her surprise. Her silver eyes shone. Yes, it worked. She looked at him, and in that moment, the truth rose unbidden in her chest. This success was not hers alone. It was theirs. As the hours went on, they tested the cell again and again, pushing it to its limits. Each time it endured. The evidence was clear. Compatibility existed where none had been believed possible. At last, they stopped to rest. Daniel leaned back, his eyes bright with wonder. "This changes everything. Your people and mine. Maybe we're not so different after all." Lyraya hesitated. Then, softly, she spoke words she never imagined saying. "Perhaps I was wrong about humans." Daniel turned to her, curious. "Wrong? How so?" Her gaze lingered on him. For years she had lived by certainty, by flawless logic, but now, with him sitting before her, she felt that certainty slipping away. "I believed humans could never satisfy the demands of my work, my people, or my spirit," she confessed. "But you have done what I thought impossible." Daniel blinked, surprised by her honesty. "I didn't do it alone, we did it together." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Perhaps, but it was your persistence, your courage, your heart that made it possible." Her voice trembled as she added, almost a whisper, "I find myself admiring you, Daniel." Silence settled between them, heavy yet fragile. Daniel looked at her with a warmth she could not name. "You know," he said gently, "I've admired you since the first day. Even when you called me fragile, even when you doubted me, I could see how much you cared about your work. That kind of passion is rare." Her chest tightened. No Illyrian had ever spoken to her like this. Admiration in her world was measured in status, in titles, in results. But here was a human, seeing her not just as chief engineer, but as Lyraya. For the first time in her life she felt seen, truly seen. The next day they presented their findings to the council. Illyrian scientists filled the chamber, their silver eyes skeptical as Daniel stood beside her. Lyraya explained the experiment, detailing the hybrid's resilience. The council members murmured, unconvinced. Then Daniel spoke. "We succeeded because we stopped fighting over which method was superior. We succeeded because we combined both, human adaptability and Illyrian precision. Together, they created something stronger." The chamber grew silent. Illyrians were not accustomed to hearing praise of another species. Yet, the data could not be denied. When the session ended, the council dismissed them without judgment, promising to review the results. As they walked back to the lab, Daniel sighed. "Do you think they'll accept it?" Lyraya shook her head. "Acceptance will not come quickly. My people fear change." Daniel smiled faintly. "So do mine." For a moment they shared quiet laughter, their differences dissolving into something simpler, understanding. That evening in the empty lab, Lyraya stood close to Daniel. The glow of the hybrid cell reflected off their faces, casting soft light between them. "I must make another confession," she said softly. Daniel tilted his head. "Another one?" She nodded. "I once declared that no human could satisfy me, intellectually, emotionally, or otherwise. Yet now I see satisfaction is not found in perfection. It is found in connection." Her silver eyes met his brown ones. "And I have found that with you." Daniel's breath caught. For a moment he seemed unsure how to answer. Then he smiled, warm and steady. "I'm glad you see it, because I feel the same." Lyraya returned to her chamber later, her thoughts racing. She opened her private log, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Confession. I can no longer deny what I feel. The human has broken my certainty, my pride, my arrogance. He has shown me that true strength lies not only in flawless design, but in persistence, in courage, in heart. And now, I confess something more. I no longer believe a human cannot satisfy me. He has satisfied something deeper than any experiment ever could, my spirit." Her words hung in the quiet air. For once, the great chief engineer of the Illyrians felt no shame in admitting weakness, because weakness, she realized, had turned into strength. The next morning, when Daniel entered the lab, she greeted him not with coldness, but with a smile. "Good morning, Daniel," she said softly. His brows lifted in surprise. Then he returned, the smile. "Good morning, Lyraya." And in that small exchange, their partnership became something more, something neither of them could deny any longer. The Orion research station had never felt so alive. Word of Lyraya and Daniel's success spread quickly through the upper sectors, stirring both interest and doubt. Illyrian scientists whispered in quiet tones, questioning how a fragile human could have contributed to something their people had tried and failed to perfect for decades. For Lyraya, the whispers no longer mattered. In the quiet corners of her heart, she knew the truth. Their work had succeeded not because of her brilliance alone, but because of Daniel's persistence, his courage, and his willingness to blend two worlds into one. The council called them again. This time, the chamber was filled not only with scientists but also with political leaders and observers from other stations. The weight of judgment pressed on Lyraya's shoulders. She stood tall, her silver eyes steady, as Daniel stood beside her. One of the council elders, a tall Illyrian with sharp features, spoke coldly. "Chief Engineer Lyraya, you bring us data that challenges centuries of certainty. You claim compatibility between our kind and humans, but many here believe this is impossible. Explain yourself." Lyraya inhaled slowly. She could feel Daniel's quiet presence at her side, steadying her like a silent anchor. Then she spoke. "Illyrians have always believed in perfection," she began. "We believed only in strength, precision, and control. We dismissed humans as weak, fragile, incapable of satisfying the demands of science or spirit." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but she raised her voice, firm and clear. "I confess, I believed this as well. I once declared no human could ever satisfy me, not in work, not in thought, not in heart. But I was wrong." The chamber fell silent. Lyraya gestured toward Daniel. "This human has shown me what my people forgot, that true strength is not only in flawless design, but in persistence. That courage is not measured by status, but by the willingness to act even in fear. That value is not in perfection, but in connection. He has satisfied something deeper than science. He has satisfied my spirit." Gasps echoed through the council. Illyrians were not known for such personal confessions, yet her voice carried conviction, unshaken. Daniel glanced at her, his brown eyes filled with quiet pride. The council elder frowned. "And what proof do you offer us besides words?" Daniel stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady. "Proof is in the results. Look at the data. Look at the hybrid cell we created. It survived tests no Illyrian experiment ever withstood. It is stronger, not because of Illyrians alone, not because of humans alone, but because of both. That is, the evidence. The council studied the records in silence. Charts glowed, results shone, undeniable in their clarity. At last, the elder spoke again. We will not give judgment today, but know this, your work will be studied further. If what you say is true, then it changes more than science. It changes the future. As they left the chamber, Daniel looked at Lyraya. That was brave. She glanced at him. To speak the truth should not require bravery. He chuckled softly. Maybe not. But you went against everything your people believe. That takes courage. Her lips curved in a faint smile. Perhaps I learned courage from a human. Back. In the lab, the hybrid cell glowed softly as if waiting. Lyraya stood beside Daniel, watching it. For once, the silence between them was not heavy. It was peaceful. Do you regret it? Daniel asked quietly. Regret what? Confessing in front of them. Saying what you did. Lyraya shook her head slowly. No. For years I sought satisfaction only in perfection. I see now that perfection without meaning is empty. You have shown me something greater. Her silver eyes turned toward him. I do not regret the truth. I regret only that I did not see it sooner. Daniel smiled warmly. Then maybe this is just the beginning. That evening, in her private chamber, Lyraya recorded her final log. Her voice was calm, steady, yet filled with emotion she could no longer hide. Final confession, she whispered. I once declared a human could never satisfy me. I believed them weak, incapable, beneath the demands of Illyrian science. But Daniel has proven me wrong. He satisfied my curiosity with his mind. He satisfied my doubts with his persistence. He satisfied my fears with his courage. And above all, he satisfied my spirit with something I never expected. Connection. She paused, her chest rising with a deep breath. I no longer see humans as lesser. I see them as partners. And I see him, not as an assistant, not as a subject, but as my equal. Perhaps more. Her voice softened to a whisper. If satisfaction means finding what was missing inside oneself, then I confess. The human has satisfied me completely. The next day, the council had not yet given its final judgment, but the lab was already alive with new interest. Illyrian, scientists who once dismissed Daniel now asked him cautious questions. Some still doubted, but others began to see the truth in the data. Daniel handled it with grace, never boasting, never pressing. He only answered calmly, his patience shining as it always did. Lyraya watched him, a quiet smile on her lips. She realized now that satisfaction was not a destination, it was a journey, and her journey with him was only beginning. As the cycle ended, they stood together by the viewport, watching the stars stretch endlessly beyond. Strange, Lyraya murmured. The stars look different now. Daniel glanced at her. Different. How? She tilted her head, silver hair catching the starlight. Before they looked cold, distant. Now they feel alive. Closer. Daniel's smile was gentle. Maybe that's because you're not looking at them alone anymore. Her heart stirred at his words. For once, she did not push the feeling away. She let it stay. Together they stood, in silence, two beings from different worlds now bound by something stronger than science. And in that silence, Lyraya knew her confession was not weakness, it was truth.